Hello and welcome to meeting 132 of the Standing Committee on Sustainable Development, Industry and Technology. Dear colleagues, I would ask you to look at the little piece of paper in front of you in order to read the instructions and the guidelines to prevent feedback incidents and for using your microphones and earpieces. We wish to help protect interpreters' health and safety. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format. To ensure that the meeting runs smoothly, I would like to remind members to raise their hands if they wish to speak. Pursuant to Standing Order 106.4, the committee is meeting to consider a request to consider the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner's Verschuren report and other findings related to Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. So without further ado, we will start the meeting. Under SO 106.4, and so I would give the floor to Mr. Perkins, who has sent around a motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, colleagues. And maybe I could just start by, since this is the first meeting since the Chair had the first new addition to his family, congratulations on behalf of His Majesty's loyal opposition on the addition of Abraham to your family, and we all wish you well in that new exciting adventure. And I hear the first 20 years are the most difficult.
Good to know. Thank you, Rick. And on that note, thank you for chairing the committee at the end of the summer. I missed you guys, but I wouldn't have missed my girlfriend's delivery for anything in the world, not even this committee.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. The right priorities. So last week, the Ethics Commissioner of Canada produced a report on the activities of the chair of the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada, Crown agency charged with distributing money to pre-commercial green technology companies. And that was in response to a letter from Conservatives way back last November asking and seeking for a clarification from the Commissioner on what we knew then. We know a lot more now, but what we knew then. And the shocking part of it, for those who weren't following, was that the chair, the Prime Minister's handpicked chair, was found to have breached ethic laws, the Conflict of Interest Act of Canada, as a public office holder for her private interests, and she improperly furthered those private interests. Now, this meeting, emergency meeting to discuss having some hearings on this, was signed, not only put forward by Conservatives, but signed by both the NDP and the Bloc to have this as a statement of the urgency of this issue. And just briefly, for those, and why this is important, is that we actually now have the two shocking reports. The first one being the auditor, or the Ethics Commissioner's report on the conduct of the chair on a very small segment of what she did. He dealt with 3 instances, essentially, of conflict where the Auditor General's report that came out in June is even more shocking, because in the case of the chair, it found actually 20 conflicts of interest, and most of those were not examined by the Ethics Commissioner. So that report by the Auditor General found that of a little over $800 million of money, taxpayer money given to green technology companies in the 5 years that she audited, 44%, 186 times directors, 9 directors, Liberal appointed directors, were found to have had conflicts of interest. 44%. The actual total of those conflicts of interest, the Auditor General reported, is $330 million of the $800 million. And also found that another $58 million, the Auditor General found, was illegally spent outside the parameters of what SDTC was allowed to in their agreements from the Government of Canada. That's almost $400 million of the $800 million was misappropriated or had a conflict of interest when it comes to this situation with the Green Slush Fund. So we are seeking a meeting with the Ethics Commissioner to discuss his findings, and we need to do that quickly because the transition is ongoing of this fund to the NRC right now, and money is starting to be spent again by the slush fund without our ability to still go in and understand the extent to which these funds were abused for insiders on the slush fund that were appointed by the Prime Minister. So we need to get to the bottom of this. So we want to see the Ethics Commissioner before this committee within the next 4 weeks, and we'd like to see as well the subject of this report, Annette Fisherian, the former chair, but the chair who is a subject of this report, also appear to discuss why she thought it was appropriate to, in almost 20 occasions, be in a conflict of interest where her personal financial interests were benefited by her being the chair. The report also mentions an organization called Mars. I think it's important for people to know that the industry department through the regional development agencies also funded over the last 5 years $48 million to Mars from the federal taxpayer, $48 million, and guess who the chair of Mars is? It's the same chair that is resigned in disgrace from the Green Slush Fund and the subject of the Ethics Commissioner report. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I understand, Mr. Perkins, maybe I've missed it, but you're moving the motion that you've circulated.
Oh, sorry. I should read that in and do that formal part, which is to move the motion that was circulated. And the motion says, given the Ethics Commissioner's Fisherian report finds that the former chair of the Sustainable Development Technologies Canada broke the Conflict of Interest Act, the committee holds 2 meetings within, this says, the earlier one said 2 weeks, but it's now 4 weeks of this motion being adopted, and calls on the following witnesses: the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, Conrad van Finkelstein, to appear for 2 hours, and former Chair of Sustainable Development Technologies Canada and current Chair of Mars, Annette Fisherian, to appear for 2 hours.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Perkins. So we're debating the motion brought forth by Mr. Perkins. I have Monsieur Villemur, Madame Damoff, Monsieur Badaway. Monsieur Villemur.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd also like to congratulate you. Of course, I won't do so on behalf of the monarchy. You understand very well why not, but congratulations. Now, we in the Bloc Québécois agree with the spirit of the motion, but I would like to comment that there are some biases here. After all, we know that the Ethics Commissioner has noted that there were ethical issues, but having read the report, I did not see a direct accusation of a conflict of interest. Yes, we know that she didn't recuse herself. Now, we know that since November 2023, we've known that this situation was dubious, and we need to consider it in detail. It's important, but is it urgent? That's debatable. And that's why I'd like to bring an amendment to the motion right away. I will be reading my amendment right now. Given that the Ethics Commissioner's Fisherian report concludes that the former leader of SDTC violated the Conflict of Interest Act, that the committee hold 2 meetings and bring the following witnesses to appear: the Ethics and Conflict of Interest Commissioner, Conrad van Finkelstein, who will appear for 2 hours, the former president of SDTC, Annette Fisherian, who would appear for 2 hours as well, and that meetings on this topic will take priority over all other subjects before the committee, and that after the return of the parliamentary session, the committee devote its first 2 meetings to hear from those witnesses. And so that motion is deemed circulated to members of the committee.
OK. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Villemur. Je pense que je vais juste vérifier avec la greffière que l'amendement...
Thank you, Mr. Villemur. I will just check with the clerk that the motion that you just read has been circulated. Let's give that a moment to make sure that the members have it before them.
Mais si je comprends bien, Monsieur Villemur...
But, Mr. Villemur, just for the benefit of my colleagues, let me say that the amendment you're bringing forward has to do with our timeline, simply that this would be the first issue on the agenda when we come back in September. Is that what you're saying? Yes, essentially, yes. The substance of the motion remains, but we would change the timeline.
It hasn't been circulated yet, but the clerk is circulating it right now. So just for every... Pardon me? I'll just maybe reiterate what Mr. Villemur is proposing is essentially the same substance of the motion, so the same witnesses, but a change in the time frame. So instead of within 4 weeks, it would be the first item of business for this committee when we resume in September, but still 2 hours with the Ethics Commissioner and 2 hours with Annette Verschuren. So you've all heard the amendment proposed by Mr. Villemur, and I will continue the discussion as it is circulated, if you don't mind, because this is essentially the substance of it. I recognize Madame Damoff.
Well, thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to sub in on this committee, and let me join other members in congratulating you and your girlfriend on the little baby boy that you welcomed. Can you clarify, Chair, Monsieur Villemur's amendment is for 1 hour with the Ethics Commissioner and 2 hours with the former chair? Is that correct? Or 2 hours with each?
It's 2 hours with each.
Okay. But the timing would be in September, is that right?
That's correct. So
I haven't seen the amendment.
First item of business when we come back in September.
Okay.
So the first week would be dedicated to these 2 meetings, from what I understand. And the motion's being circulated now, so you'll have the exact wording, not the motion, the amendment to the motion, but that's essentially it, MP Damoff.
Okay. So I would like to speak to it if I could. I have the pleasure of sitting with my friend from the block on the Ethics Committee, where we did hear from the Ethics Commissioner as well as from the former chair prior to her resigning. But I will say, and I remember being really disappointed. That's probably not a good word, concerned and disappointed with the way she conducted herself on that committee. I mean, this was someone who had a history going back to the Harper years of being appointed to boards and advisory committees. And I pointed out to her that even if she got advice to the contrary, she should have known better and should have recused herself. I don't think there's any disagreement amongst the parties on this. She did not behave the way that she should have. She's not new to the role. If I could be mistaken on this, I think she was even appointed under former Prime Minister Martin, then under the Harper government, and then ours. So she's someone that came with the experience that she should have known better. I don't think we need 2 hours with both of these. I think if somebody added up all the hours that both of these individuals had testified at different committees in the House of Commons, I think you should hear from them, certainly. But I think an hour for each one would be sufficient. So I'd like to amend Mr. Villemur's amendment to one meeting of 1 hour each, if I could, Chair. Is that appropriate right now?
Well, that would be a sub-amendment. Just one second, I'll just validate with the clerk.
Okay.
So just to clarify, Madame Damoff, you're suggesting, so you're proposing to sub-amend Mr. Villemur's amendment so that instead of it being 2 meetings of 2 hours, it would be 1 meeting with 1 hour for the Ethics Commissioner and 1 hour for Annette Verschuren.
Exactly, yes.
The rest of the amendment proposed by Mr. Villemur remains the same.
That's correct. It's just the timeline. and just for the reasons that I stated, both of these witnesses have spoken about this at great length. I think the committee should definitely hear from these individuals, but 2 hours each, I think, is more time than is needed to get to the bottom of well, not even get to the bottom of it. I shouldn't say that, because the minister actually quickly acted when the information came to light, and took action to on what was happening on the fund, and certainly they appeared at the ethics committee shortly after all of this came to light. But I think 1 hour for each of them would be adequate to have parliamentarians ask the questions that they wish to ask of them. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Damoff. So we have a sub-amendment. You've all heard the proposition by MP Damoff. So right now we're debating the sub-amendment. We can vote on it at some point and then get back to the amendment by Mr. Villemur. MP Damoff's sub-amendment is on the floor right now, and it's really about the number of meetings and the time allocated for each witnesses. So that would be what we're discussing right now. And I have MP Badaway followed by Brian Massey on my list. And then Mr. Cooper.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll say this, and I'll be blunt about it. Especially for the past year, we've been going through this diatribe of attempts by the Conservatives to time after time create scandal, as well as in an attempt to create a narrative that the government isn't acting in the best interests of Canadians. And quite frankly, I'm getting tired of it, because it's just, once again, a narrative that they continually try to gain, and of course, utilize the media to get out there to try and manipulate public opinion. With that said, it's just simply playing politics. And I think, as Ms. Damoff alluded to, we feel that this is of extreme importance. The minister back on October 3rd, 2023, thought it was of extreme importance by announcing corrective actions after his fact-finding efforts to come to the bottom of what we're discussing today. So bottom line, it's being dealt with.
Just 1 second, MP Badaway. I have a point of order. Mr. Brock?
I thought the chair made it abundantly clear that we were debating the sub-amendment, not the substantive motion brought by Mr. Perkins, or the amended motion brought by Mr. Villemur. And what we're hearing is completely irrelevant material on the sub-amendment. So I'd like to get to the point, because there's a number of members who want to add to this discussion. We have a number of motions on the table. All will have to come to a vote at some point. I just ask that the chair get to the point, or ask the member to get to the point.
Thank you, MP Brock. And just to be clear, we have one motion, and then one amendment and one sub-amendment, and we're discussing, in fact, the sub-amendment. So I'd ask members to try to generally stay on topic of the sub-amendment, which we're discussing right now with regards to the number of hours per witnesses and the number of meetings, so from 2 to 1. However, Mr. Brock and this committee were rather collegial. I've given leeway on all sides to sometimes stray a little past the exact topic we're discussing, and I think it can be pertinent to the sub-amendment to discuss the broader context. So I give a bit of leeway, but let's try to focus on the sub-amendment so that we can move with haste and efficiency in this meeting. Mr. Badaway, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I do apologize for hurting Mr. Brock's feelings. However, the topic at hand is with respect to the issue, and I'm speaking about the issue through the sub-amendment that Ms. Damoff has presented. With that, and the overlying message that I'm speaking on, however, is the time being wasted by the cons once again to play their political games. Having said that, we are going to be, and speaking to Mr. Damoff's sub-amendment, we are looking at an amendment that outlines 2 meetings And again, I'm not prepared to play those political games over the course of those 2 meetings. I think 1 meeting will suffice. I think with that, given the opportunity to the 3 individuals that we're actually going to allocate an hour each to, will in fact come to the results of what we're all looking for out of this meeting. And with that as well, the opportunity to once again bring attention to the efforts by the minister to look at corrective actions being taken ever since he announced that back on October 3rd, 2023. And I think at the very least, both Mr. Brock and his colleagues on the opposite side will recognize that we are here to get a job done, not a political job, but the business of government, and get to the bottom of which we're all looking for with respect to this 1 meeting being undertaken. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and again, congratulations. So I've got, I think, a decent record here of trying to be collegial and getting things done and compromise. And let me lay it out in terms of the sub amendment and the other amendments, because we can either have a long meeting or a quick one. And so the sub amendment won't fly for me in terms of 1 meeting instead of 2, just because of a couple things. It won't even allow all members to participate in that meeting. So for me, with all the we've invested in it, it's a no-go. And if the bloc, if Mr. Villeneuve agrees with that, then that's done and that's over with, because the Conservatives probably won't agree to reduce their amount of time. So that brings us then to the main motion, and the main motion amended by Mr. Villeneuve is to have the meetings when we return the House of Commons in September, which I don't think the Conservatives want, but at the same time is a moot point if we don't change our position and the Bloc doesn't change their position and the Liberals don't. So that it means is that we can actually get this meeting done quickly if we want, in terms of getting 2 meetings done for 2 hours for the witnesses, and it would be at the beginning of session. And just a point with regards to that is that often we waste those first 2 meetings in that week on planning, which we would then get out of the way. So it is an advancement in time and effort. And as well, too, is that we don't absorb House of Commons resources for maybe a week or 2 weeks in advance of Parliament coming back, taking people off of vacations, taking people away from their families, and also making sure that the House doesn't have to have encumbrance prices with regards to reinstating the committee. So I appeal to the members here today, if you do want to actually get things wrapped up and get going on this very important matter, and I won't speak to the substance here or there, motivations, but the reality of the math is that A, the Liberal amendment's a no-go if we hold to the position right now, and then later on the Conservatives would then have to put a little water in their wine, so to speak, by making sure that the committee does have to have the meetings and they get to have the time that they want, which I think is a good motion, but it won't happen until we get back, but which is an advancement in time, because normally that time would be wasted as we start to plan the House of Commons.
Thank you very much, Mr. Massey, for this clear intervention, and I think a quick meeting is what we would all hope for. So thank you very much, Mr. Massey, for laying it out so clearly. Mr. Cooper.
There we go. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And with the greatest of respect to Mr. Massey and Monsieur Villemur, I see no reason why between now and when the House goes back that this committee can allocate 2 meetings, 4 hours. I don't think that's much to ask. It seems like some members would prefer to take the vacation off or to prefer to be in their ridings. Well, I'd like to be in my riding as well. But this committee has important work to do in the face of a very damning report from the Ethics Commissioner with respect to the conduct of the former chair of Sustainable Development Technology Canada, better known as the Liberals' billion-dollar green slush fund. I just want to say, before I get into why its time is of the essence, that I am astounded by the remarks of my friend Mr. Badaway in terms of his characterization that Conservatives are playing politics and that this is about political games. And he said that Conservatives have been on some sort of diatribe, those were his words, over the past year. What is he talking about? Has he not read the Auditor General's report that found that 400 million taxpayer dollars improperly went out the door, that 330 million taxpayer dollars were funneled from the Green Slush Fund into companies of board members. $330 million. Of that, $76 million went into companies of board members as they deliberated and voted at board meetings to funnel money into their own companies or companies that they have interest in. Those were the findings of the Auditor General. On top of that, there were 186 conflicts of interest, and he says it's political games, it's politics. I'll tell you what it is. It's liberal corruption. And he should be embarrassed to be part of a government that over the past 9 years has resulted in a culture of corruption that starts at the top, starts with the Prime Minister, that has made its way through all aspects of this government, including this billion-dollar Green Slush Fund, which one department official characterized as sponsorship-level corruption. And we have now a report from the Ethics Commissioner that found that the former chair, who was handpicked by none other than former Industry Minister Navdeep Bains, the Prime Minister's best pal.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Badaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Relevance?
Yeah, Mr. Badaway, the same goes for Mr. Cooper, and I was waiting for Mr. Brock to raise a point of order, but
I'm sure
but
he
as you can see,
wasn't gonna do that.
as you can
I
see,
viewed his entire intervention as relevant.
yes, well, as you can see, I give quite a bit of leeway, so I'll let you continue, Mr. Cooper, but let's try to. I think we know where everyone stands. We can probably proceed to votes fairly quickly, and Mr. Perkins can catch his flight. So I'll yield the floor back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm going to get into right now why it's important that we have these hearings. We have a report from the Ethics Commissioner, a damning report that found that the Liberal-appointed former chair of the Green Slush Fund broke the law, violated ethics laws by contravening on multiple occasions the Conflict of Interest Act. More specifically, the report of the Ethics Commissioner found that the chair broke the law when she moved 2 motions at Green Slush Fund board meetings that resulted in one of her companies, NR Store, to receive nearly $220,000 in taxpayer money. That is a case of straight-up self-dealing, straight-up conflicts of interest, straight-up corruption, and now she has been found guilty. And so, given the report, it's important that we get to it, to hear from the Ethics Commissioner and to hear from Ms. Verscheren. There is no reason why this should not happen for almost 2 months. With respect to the Ethics Commissioner's report, I think it's also important to note that it is narrow in scope and that it needs to be read alongside the damning Auditor General's report, which was released in June. And with respect to Ms. Verscheren and the need for her to appear at least for 2 hours, and why I think there is a need to hear from her sooner rather than later, and certainly not when we go back in 2 months, is the fact that the Ethics Commissioner specifically looked at only 2 instances where she had, in what he determined was conduct that amounted to a conflict of interest when she moved those 2 motions that resulted in $220,000 being funneled to NR Store. But when one reads the Auditor General's report, the Auditor General identified 20 additional conflicts involving Ms. Verscheren, where she participated in and voted in favor of motions that resulted in monies being funneled from the Green Slush Fund to companies that she has an interest in. Those additional 20 conflicts involve a further $2,560,000, nearly $2.6 million that went to companies that she has an interest in addition to the $217,000 that the Ethics Auditor General identified and that the Ethics Commissioner looked into, in which he found Ms. Verscheren guilty of violating the Conflict of Interest Act. And so it seems to me that based upon the Auditor General's report, that there may in fact be much more work for the Ethics Commissioner to do to investigate whether Ms. Verscheren contravened the Conflict of Interest Act multiple other times in 20 cases identified by the Auditor General of conflict. And so it underscores why we need to hear from Ms. Verscheren sooner rather than later. She needs to come before a committee and she needs to address these 20 additional conflicts, and then based upon her testimony, additional steps can be taken, including referring the matter to the Ethics Commissioner to undertake a further investigation. So I have more to say, but I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Brock, you're the last person I have on my list.
Thank you, Chair, and I would be remiss if I didn't join with the rest of my colleagues and offer congratulations as well, sir. You're in for a ride of your life. So I want to keep my comments brief. I understand I'm the last speaker on the list unless someone raises their hand. But I've listened very carefully to everything that my colleagues have said. And I want to underscore the importance of not only this being important, an issue that needs to be fully examined at this committee, but also urgent. And as my colleague, Mr. Cooper, has alluded, in my view, I share the same view that the Ethics Commissioner's report was narrowly focused. It underscores what we have heard by way of various reports in national media, that the level of corruption with this Justin Trudeau government and how they misuse taxpayer money is merely the tip of the iceberg. It's not a day that does not go by, Mr. Chair, that I hear from followers on my social media who are thanking the opposition parties, particularly the Conservatives, and it's Conservatives, not cons, to correct the characterization
just
of
one
Mr.
second,
Badaway.
Just one second, Mr.
A comment
Brock.
like that in the House would have been met with a strong rebuke.
Relevance, Mr. Chair.
Mr.
from
Brock,
the
just
Speaker
one
of the
second. I
House.
have a point of order from MP Badaway.
Relevance.
In reference to us,
Excuse
cons?
me, Mr. Badaway. I can't hear your point of order, and I think the boom is not properly.
Point of order, relevance, Mr. Chair.
I've ruled on this many times before. I give quite a bit of leeway. I've done that for you, MP Badaway. I'll do the same for Mr. Brock. You can pursue. And as a reminder, colleagues, we're on the sub-amendment. I think we know where every party stands at this point. In the interest of time and efficiency, we could probably let this debate go to a vote at some point. So, Mr. Brock, the floor is yours.
Without further interventions from the Liberals, Mr. Chair, I'm sure I can finish my remarks in a minute to 2 minutes. So to get to my point, I hear constantly about the government misusing taxpayer money. And the comments I receive on social media daily is, great, you've exposed the scandal, as you continue to do, but when are we going to get our money back? And the Liberals already have passed a timeline in which to report to the House as to how they were going to recoup the monies with the ArriveCan scandal. That deadline had long passed in the month of June. And I'm sure, and that's close to $60 million. We've got close to $500 million of wasted money that went to the preferred interests of a hand-picked chair by Justin Trudeau, who should have known better. should not have relied upon the advice of a lawyer who was also conflicted, should have obtained advice from an independent legal counsel. She did not. Given her business acumen, she should have taken the appropriate steps. She willfully and deliberately chose to break the code of ethics as set out under that particular act, and she was found not guilty not once but twice, Mr. Chair. Now, this will be another debate for another time and perhaps in a different committee. The penalty is $500 per infraction, $1,000 for essentially stealing close to $500 million. This is what happens when you are closely connected to the Liberal Party of Canada, more particularly when you're closely connected to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. You get rewarded with zero consequence. On the issue of consequence, I hope the RCMP are following this meeting very carefully. I hope they have reviewed the Ethics Commissioner's report very carefully. I hope they've reviewed the Auditor General's report very carefully, because there's criminality involved here. When Ms. Verscheren appeared before the Ethics Committee several months ago, I warned her point blank at this point, without even getting into all the details that had been uncovered, just the stories that came out in the national news at that point about the breaches of the ethics rules and the conflict of interest that was overlooked. I warned her at that point she should lawyer up. I advised her about the potential criminal charges involved in the actions that she has taken, the breach of trust, the fraud, potential forgery. All of these issues are live issues that need to be explored. But we need to find out how deep the rot really is at SDTC and what really that number is in terms of governmental waste. And that is why we will support the motion brought by my colleague, Mr. Perkins. We believe 2 meetings are appropriate of 2 hours each for those 2 witnesses, but there is a high degree of urgency here, Mr. Chair, and it cannot wait till Parliament resumes in the middle of September. The public needs to know exactly what the true value is and what steps we are going to take as a committee to ensure accountability. Because, Mr. Chair, accountability and good governance does not and should not take a vacation.
La parole est à vous, suivi de Monsieur Villemur.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, based on what the Liberals are saying, they agree that there were serious ethical violations in the management of this SDTC fund, not only by the chair of the board, but also by board members. The Liberals, too, recognize that. Now, the Bloc Québécois has said that these are serious ethical violations, and we saw that in the Ethics Commissioner's report. And it's not the only report to point that out. And now we're finding ourselves voting on a sub-amendment that we don't agree on because Ms. Damoff said that we should spend only 1 hour with each witness, the Ethics Commissioner and the former chair of the board. We don't agree with that. And Mr. Villemur from the BQ is saying we should just proceed merrily with our vacation. And then he's suggesting that we have 2 2-hour meetings, 4 hours in total. It seems to me that it's only reasonable to hope that parliamentarians can accomplish that by the end of August. In order to cast light on these serious ethical gaps, we know that there were problems. No one is actually debating that. I think we need to vote as quickly as possible and hold those meetings as soon as possible to try to cast light on this unfortunate squandering of money that took place in the fund. as well as the fact that money was given to businesses associated with board members, including the chair. Yes, Mr. Généreux, unfortunately, I still have people on my list. So we can't vote until I've exhausted my list. Mr. Villemure, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been listening to this debate. And sometimes we can say the same thing in different ways. In this case, we all agree that something must be done. We all agree that the matter is important. We just don't agree on the specific modalities. I just have a friendly suggestion that people may or may not look kindly on, but we know we want to hear from Ms. Verschuren and the Ethics Commissioner. I listened closely to my conservative colleague who says that he has many colleagues for them. So my friendly suggestion is the following: to hold a 3-hour meeting where the commissioner would take the first hour and then Ms. Verschuren would get the 2 hours. So that's just a friendly idea to try to satisfy everyone here. And then those meetings would still be held after the parliamentary return. And just for my colleague for Bose, this is not a matter of being on vacation or not. It's simply about the fact that citizens may be more attentive to this at that time of year, and this is an important issue. If we hold the meetings during the vacation, people will say that we're trying to do this in a discreet way, rather than doing it when everyone's back in September. So personally, I think if we do it, like I said, 3 hours in September, well, I think we could all agree on that. Thank you, Mr. Villemure. Ms. Damoff.
Oh, Pam, MP Damoff, your boom is up.
My apologies. Thank you. I always appreciate what Mr. Villemure brings to the table, and I also appreciate what Mr. Massey was saying about getting to this quickly. And I would ask for the unanimous consent of the committee to withdraw my motion and put forward what Mr. Villemure has suggested, which would be 1 hour with the Ethics Commissioner and 2 hours, so a 3-hour meeting.
MP Damoff, we'll just proceed step by step. I understand what you're trying to do, but so you're seeking UC to withdraw your sub-amendment. So
That's correct.
Is there UC to withdraw the sub-amendment by MP Damoff? I see that there is. So it's withdrawn. You still have the floor.
Okay, so I would put forward then, Chair, that it would be to sub-amend Mr. Villemure's amendment, that it would be 1 3-hour meeting, which would be 1 hour with the Ethics Commissioner. And I don't think the other part needs to be amended because it already says 2 hours. So it would just be 1 3-hour meeting and amend 1 hour with the Ethics Commissioner instead of 2, and it would remain a meeting in September.
Thank you. So we've all heard what MP Damoff is proposing, so sub-amending the amendment by MP Villemure. So for 1 3-hour meeting, basically, 1 hour with the Ethics Commissioner, 2 hours with Verschuren. So I see no more speakers, which I'm quite happy with. We can then proceed to a vote on the sub-amendment. And I will ask the clerk to, I see no one wants to talk. So if it's all clear, we are voting on the sub-amendment proposed by MP Damoff on Mr. Villemure's amendment.
And the vote is on the sub-amendment, Ms. Damoff. Mr. Turnbull.
I support.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes?
Mr. Gahir.
In favor?
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Badaway.
In favor.
Mr. Perkins.
Opposed.
Mr. Généreux.
Contre.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Brock.
No.
Monsieur Villemure.
En faveur.
Mr. Massey.
Oui.
Okay, so the sub-amendment is adopted, which brings us back to the amendment to the motion. So the amendment proposed by Mr. Villemure, which essentially puts this meeting on SDTC, so this 3-hour meeting as the first item of business when we come back in September. I see no speakers, so I would like, well, Mr. Perkins.
There's been a lot of discussion since I introduced the original motion, so I'll just briefly say, without repeating everything that's been said by my colleagues, the lack of urgency on this large corruption scandal is appalling to me. Like, every time there's a report, whether it's the investigations by various parliamentary committees, whether it's new documents produced by the whistleblowers, whether it was then new testimony from the former president of SDTC, who declared a number of shocking things about the way the board operated. Then we had the incredible Auditor General's report finding almost $400 million misappropriated. Every time there's an investigation, now the Ethics Commissioner, and we uncover a deeper and deeper and deeper level of conflict of interest, self-dealing, and frankly, feathering their own beds for their financial interest. And the 9 Liberal directors appointed by the Liberals that were outlined in the Auditor General's report. And the minister who cares so much about this unfroze the funds. The fund and the slush fund is now open again. The only difference is they've moved the slush fund to another group headed by a bunch of former retired bureaucrats, which in their testimony before this committee gave zero confidence, or before another committee, zero confidence that they had any ability or idea of how to stop this corruption that's gone on, or that there'll be any new processes. There should not be any spending in this fund going on right now. It shouldn't be happening until all of these reports and are delved into, and we've got more shocking testimony, and we need to get on this, because what's happening is as the Liberals and the Bloc and the NDP don't want to bother doing this for another month and a half to 2 months, money of taxpayers is going out the door to these same companies, in all likelihood in stage 3, stage 4, whatever, of former Liberal directors now still benefiting from their insider job of being on this committee. And so I know everybody's got lots of other things to do. We all do. But I don't think there's anything more important than dealing with the fact that this is 10 times the size of the sponsorship scandal during the Chrétien Liberal government. That was $42 million. This is almost $400 million so far on every investigation. And every time there is a report, the number grows. And it's shocking to me that members of Parliament in this committee think that this isn't of greatest urgency to delve into now with the Ethics Commissioner, that we can wait. We can wait until the House comes back in September, and maybe we'll spare a single meeting. Spare a single meeting to $400 million and growing of taxpayer money that has gone to conflicts of interest and been spent illegally, according to the Auditor General, outside the terms that it was granted to the Green Slush Fund. That there isn't a sense of urgency here to people to stop this and fix it and get to the bottom of it. That they want to wait till the middle of September to give one whole meeting to it. Come on, guys. Like, this is why we oppose the amendments to the meetings, because our desire as Conservatives, of which, why are we having an emergency meeting today? We're having an emergency meeting today because we put forward a request to have these urgent meetings because of the Ethics Commissioner's report that came out last week. And I thought that the Bloc and the NDP thought it was also urgent because they co-signed the letter. But apparently now they come to the meeting and it's not urgent. It can wait. So I would urge members to reconsider their change of heart that's happened in this meeting to support the Liberals in hiding and covering up the corruption in the Green Slush Fund, because that's what it is. More delay is more cover-up. And if you vote for this amendment, in my view, you're voting to continue the Liberal cover-up in the Green Slush Fund.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. I see no other speaker.
No.
Oh, Mr. Massey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to speak for this, especially after that intervention, which is rather unfortunate because the Conservatives actually talked themselves out of one meeting that they would have had earlier had they actually moved appropriately on this. And first of all, want to acknowledge that what we're talking about here specifically, when you do the math, which has always been the Conservatives' mortal enemy, there's actually 9 business days that we're talking about a difference here, because if we can't get the witnesses in the next 4 weeks, the time between that time period ending and then when we assume our responsibilities back here in the House on that Monday is 9 business days. And so that's what we're talking about as a difference here. And so I think it's pretty rich to actually come here and then chastise ourselves in the block for agreeing to actually have a meeting to sit down with responsibility and in earnest to try to find a path forward, like we promised. When we actually dealt with this issue last to Parliament, we promised that we would return back to this once we got the reports. And we did so immediately when I was contacted right away, and it came over here. But just because the Conservatives are insisting on spending tens of thousands of dollars to have this 9 business days in advance, they try to chastise ourselves in the block for trying to make Parliament work. And that's terribly unfortunate, especially given the fact that these members also filibustered days of this committee last Parliament. So for all their sanctimony about having to get to this right away, we could have actually been doing this work on last Parliament. But what we had last Parliament was the Conservatives filibustering on auto files and other things like that, chewing up this committee, chewing up other committees on a regular basis. Not just on an individual aspect for here, submitting multiple motions, multiple places, multiple times, and they did so consistently. And if we want to talk about scandals, I mean, I've been around here long enough to see a lot of scandals. I mean, I could just list off a whole series of here from the, you know, there's the Liberal scandals on certain things, but there's also the Harper administration scandals, everything from electoral fraud to a whole series of different interventions when it comes to Airbus, comes to former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. I mean, it could go on and on and on. We could do the relevance, we could do all those different things, but at the same time, we want to get to the subject matter here at place, and that's why we actually sat down here. So the request that we have here in front of us to actually have the 2 meetings in this time frame was even at the sense a little bit optimistic of trying to guarantee that we can get 2 independent witnesses. We actually can get prepared and ready, get House of Commons resources to restart down here, and then on the same time do so when we're looking at basically a week and a half difference of when it can take place. So I don't think it's very unreasonable, and I don't think that the Bloc is playing games on this. I think they came prepared to this meeting to find a solution with an alternative. I've been in discussions with different people, and it's been publicly chastised by the Conservatives to come here and then saying that we're actually in cahoots trying to stop for accountability of this. It's absolutely wrong for every single time we've actually agreed and had these meetings. And I won't let that stand on the public record, because the public record shows that we have been pushing this issue, even when I couldn't get the things that I wanted for the workers. And when we talk about the workers here, the Conservatives have not put forth anything on the whistleblowers here. And we have had testimony the last time we had here, not a single one of the organizations even mentioned the families and the whistleblowers of that. And I tried to actually work to get an amendment in the House of Commons on one of their official opposition days motion, but it was worded in a way that it couldn't allow for that. It was nobody's fault, just the way that it was. But we have families of these members. They just talk about, you know, basically the Liberals and the scandals and so forth and just trying to tar it with that. Well, what about all the workers that actually had to leave their job, had to sign non-disclosure clauses that still haven't been dealt with today? What about the workers that couldn't actually carry their pensions over, had to cash out? What about the workers that actually had to find different types of employment? And then the new system that I have in place still doesn't give them the ultimate protection that I want, is that full public service protection as whistleblowers. We have all those issues there. So, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chair, I take offense to the fact that it is characterization that this committee is not working. I take offense to the characterization the NDP and the Bloc are playing games with this when we came here to do the proper work and do the right thing. So over a few business days, they want to cheapen this entire process down, which is entirely significant. And even if we actually have those things that take place and we did it within their time frame, you know what happens, Mr. Chair? We can't do anything as a committee till the House resumes anyways. There's very little that we can do until the House resumes with regards to this. We can't bring it to the chamber. We can't do any of those things necessary as well. And so now we have a chance to prepare and get ready and do something actually meaningful. And I think it's unfortunate that they characterize us and to go back in this House of Commons, I guess this is what the Conservatives want, is to go back to a dysfunctional House, the House of Commons. Because on an issue right here, and you look at consistently, even the Liberals have voted consistently to actually have hearings on this. Yes, there's been differences about how we approach it, who gets to come at certain times, the amount of time that's there, but they are on the record as well looking at this issue. And to do that, as we warm up to get back here in September to do hard work that's necessary and to poison the well right away when there's sincere efforts to do so, well, fine. They get their moment of glory, their clips, all those things that they want. But at the same time, they will not get what they want in this committee unless they actually cooperate in the terms of trying to make sure things are going to be done with sincerity, because that's the history of this committee. I'm sticking with it when I go back to make this place work. And if they want to come here and do these types of cheap tactics and games over serious issues, then shame on them. Just because they didn't get a few days of business time that they could actually have it, it's whining, complaining, sad, irresponsible, and shows a lack of class for a party that's supposed to be saying that they're going to be the next government.
Thank you, MP
No, that's
Massey.
a clip. Well said, Brian.
Mr. Perkins.
I appreciate what the NDP member has said, but let's be clear. Our original motion, which he's well aware, was to have the meeting within 2 weeks, and to accommodate him, we provided some generosity in going the 4 weeks to get it on his schedule. It could happen in 2 weeks. I'm willing to have this meeting tomorrow, but the member is got a busy schedule, as we all do, and so we're trying to accommodate. So it's totally incorrect to say that we weren't trying to accommodate. Now, what the member has voted for, and what the Liberals have voted for, and what the Bloc has voted for, is to turn 2 meetings or 4 hours of hearings into 1 meeting 2 months from now, almost 2 months from now, to cram it all together and then move on. Now, you can disagree with that classification, but that's the change to our motion that the NDP and Bloc and Liberals are supporting. And that's what I oppose, and I'll leave it there because I still believe that this needs to be dealt with now, not sometime in the distant future.
MP Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little bit taken aback by Mr. Massey's comments. He talked about 9 business days difference. What is he talking about? The motion that Conservatives put forward provides for hearings, 2 hearings, both involving the Ethics Commissioner and Ms. Verscheren within the next 2 weeks. So this notion that it's 9 business days difference is simply not true. He says that Conservatives have difficulty with math. It seems that he has difficulty with math, with the greatest of respect. And he talks about sad and irresponsible. I'll tell you what is sad and irresponsible, and that is the fact that the NDP take their orders from their boss,
Point of order,
named Justin
Chair.
Trudeau.
Yeah, just one
Point of
second,
order.
MP Cooper. Yes, Madam Dama.
So the motion that I was sent, that Mr. Perkins submitted, clearly says 4 weeks. I don't know what Mr. Cooper is talking about, but Mr. Perkins' motion says 4 weeks, which takes us to August 28th. And if you add up the days, it is in fact 9 days. So I think, I know that the Conservatives like to deal in misinformation, but let's stick with the facts. The motion clearly says 4 weeks.
No.
Thank you, MP Dama, for your point of order. I tend to agree. Looking at the calendar, it does call for 4 weeks, but Mr. Cooper, floor
no,
is yours.
very simply, we could be meeting next week. If the Conservative motion had passed,
Point of
we could
order.
be meeting the following week.
Point of order, Mr. Massey.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, though, he just agreed with the motion again, so maybe we can get clarification that, insisting that it was 2 weeks when it's not 2 weeks it's 4 weeks. So I hope the member can at least, within 4 weeks, yeah, within 4 weeks. So it could happen at the end of the 4 weeks. So we're not talking about 2
It could
weeks.
happen tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's not. You put it in for 4 weeks, so it means that you're
thank
actually
you,
willing
MP
to do
Massey.
it within 4 weeks.
Thank you, MP Massey.
Not
MP
tomorrow,
Cooper.
because you want to go to your event.
The reality is within 4 weeks allows for the chair and the clerk to invite witnesses. So chances are of it happening tomorrow are very, very slim.
And we
but Mr.
wanted
Cooper, the floor is yours.
And we wanted it within 2 weeks. That's what we initially wanted, and we were prepared to provide within 4 weeks, but it certainly means that the committee could be at work. So this notion that it's 9 days is nonsense. And what is sad and irresponsible is that the NDP take their marching orders from Justin Trudeau. Here you have $400 million that improperly went out the door, including $330 million to companies in which Liberal insiders padded their pockets. And what are the NDP doing? They're doing the bidding of the Liberals. They're doing the bidding of Justin Trudeau to delay hearings, to delay the ability of this committee to do its work, to hold a lawbreaker, Ms. Verscheren, accountable, to get answers about the 20 additional conflicts that the Auditor General identified that perhaps the Ethics Commissioner ought to start looking into, and to see that taxpayers get a refund, that taxpayers get their money back, as this current Minister of Industry, who professes to be so concerned about this scandal, but did nothing, did absolutely nothing, as his Assistant Deputy Minister sat in on each and every meeting in which there were 186 conflicts until it hit the media. And then he said, oh, well, I'm now concerned. And then in the face of the Auditor General's report, what does he do? He starts releasing funds back to the very same corrupt Liberal insiders. It's a total and complete racket, and it's disappointing that Mr. Massey is going along with the Liberals to delay the work of this committee, which could be meeting as early as next week to, as a starting point, hear from the Auditor General and Ms. Verscheren. It's very disappointing.
Thank you, MP Cooper. I have Brian Massey, René Villemur, and MP Brock. Monsieur Massey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to reconfirm what we're actually doing here, and this within the 4 weeks, and then the difference between then and then when we can go is that. And to suggest that somehow, I mean, I'd be interested to know the procedural tactics that were going to be employed to actually get the ethics commissioner or somebody else here tomorrow. Less than a few hours' notice is kind of almost sad to hear that as an argument, because I think the member's better than that, suggesting that we can somehow have the power to do that, especially given the fact that we had to actually assign this as a special meeting. And so I don't know how we would subpoena somebody within a matter of hours or days for that, and why we would do that to a commissioner of the Crown that reports to all of Parliament, who has been cooperative in doing their job related to this, seems rather abusive, that's for sure. And if we want to talk about scandals, and if the Conservatives want to do that, I mean, I have a whole list of here. The No-Dona issue, we had the illegal transfer of funds, we have the Phoenix pay system. I mean, I could go on for hours and hours and hours, because I lived those Harper scandals. We have Dean Del Mastro, we have others of electoral fraud from the East Coast in particular. We have a whole series of different things. But again, this is something that I think we want to get to, and I think we're being responsible for doing so, and then to be attacked by it is unfortunate, because I think it just cheapens the entire issue. And again, I'm rather stunned in some respects that there wasn't an interest to actually cooperate to get what they could have achieved. And I guess maybe they're having a tantrum right now because they came into the meeting with probably a stronger position. What they're getting now is because they played their hand so poorly. And that's the end result at the end of the day. There was actually 2 meetings with 2 hours, which were agreeable, which I spoke to at the beginning of my intervention, suggesting that I wouldn't reduce the time for the other request. And then we went to another attempt to have a sincere approach to getting this committee moving and getting things done, which was offered by the Bloc. So that's where we landed, and where hopefully we'll land here today and move on. If not, if we don't get this done in the next few minutes with regards to this, then I guess we have to call another meeting Or do we extend? I'm not sure in terms of procedure for that, but that's where we could end up if that's where the members want to go, and continue the process.
Thank you, Mr. Massé. We still have resources, I believe, until 6:40 or more or less. 6:30, 6:40. And just as a reminder, colleagues, we're still on the amendment. I thought we were about to get this meeting over with, but we're still on the amendment of Mr. Villemur as sub-amended by MP Damoff. Monsieur Villemur, la parole est à vous.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just want to bring the temperature down a little bit and try to bring this conversation into a state of good faith. We all agree we need to do something. We all agree that this is important, yes, but what we don't agree on is when we should take action. I would invite my friends from the official opposition to, they can oppose things for sure, but I would ask them not to filibuster. We're not saying this isn't important. We're not saying that. We're simply saying that the meetings should be held at a time when people are actually paying attention. That's it. This is such an important issue that this is not a time to try to score points and show that the others are wrong. Instead, we need to take concrete action when people are actually paying attention. And I would invite all my colleagues to take a deep breath and to consider what truly is the wisest course of action and move forward with the amendment as proposed. Thank you, Mr. Villemur. I appreciate what you said, Mr. Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To address Mr. Villemur's latest comments about the utility of a meeting when Parliament resumes, because presumably people are paying more attention, really belittles the issue that's before this committee right now, is that we've got an explosive scandal that is some 7 times the size of the ArriveCan scandal that I still get commentary on, that Canadians are still talking about, that the government is doing nothing in terms of trying to recoup the lost tens of millions of dollars. And now we've got a scandal that is, according to the deputy minister for industry, is akin to the sponsorship scandal, close to $500 million. If that doesn't cry out for some degree of urgency, I don't know what does. It certainly, in my view, attracts the attention of Canadians. Yes, most Canadians are on holidays right now, but Canadians could be on holidays through the entire year. This scandal strikes at the core of good governance. And what we have right now is a failed Liberal government that simply disregards the interests of the taxpayer time after time after time. I've lost track, Mr. Chair, as to how many active RCMP investigations are currently underway with respect to the actions of this government. So I find it appalling, quite frankly, when my NDP colleague, Mr. Massey, displays his anger and his disgust that we wanted to insist on an earlier meeting. The wording of our motion was abundantly clear. It wasn't after 4 weeks, it was within 4 weeks. We are here in Ottawa today. We are here to press upon our colleagues and to press upon the chair that this matter is of some urgency, needs to be addressed. Yes, I too would like to be back in my community. I've missed 2 very important events in my community. I'm missing events with my family right now. But the nice thing, Mr. Chair, with our role as politicians, we are politicians for the entire year. Our work doesn't end at the middle of June, and we resume again in September. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can fulfill our obligations on this committee to ensure that taxpayers are receiving good value for their money. And to hold the government to account and be there for our community as well. So I take offense to some of the comments made by Mr. Massey. We are not playing games here. We all want to get to the heart of the matter, and we want to shed true light on this scandal to find out what exactly has transpired over the last 3 years with the SDTC and how taxpayers can expect to receive some portion of that money back.
Merci. Monsieur Massé, la parole est à vous.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll respond when I'm brought up, and I'm sorry that Mr. Brock finds it offensive, but Mr. Brock wasn't here when his colleagues filibustered this committee hours and hours and days, preventing us from getting to this issue and other things that were actually on the table. And so that's actually on the public record and was done within the House of Commons time. So here, what we're discussing, yes, it is within the 4 weeks is what the request was. But after that, is if it was at the end of those 4 weeks, there are only a few business days left before starting. And this will be the first time, I believe, in my, I think, 18 years here at this committee, where we will actually have business on the first day. My 23 years in Parliament, but this will be the first time when we actually have employment of this committee deployed to have substance and meetings immediately. That has never happened before. Might be the first time in the history of this meeting. So I'm sorry that Mr. Brock's disappointed with that, but at the same time, when you're looking at trying to get this public servants coming forward, probably to do this properly and to continue our studies that we have, then why are we going then to try to force something to happen in the short term and reemploy everything right now versus the few days that are left over from when we could have actually had this and when we start again and do it properly. And we'll also have all the access to the features of the House of Commons to deal with it, which is going to be important because we're going to have an officer of Parliament here that's responsible to all of Parliament, not just this committee. And second to that, we're also going to be able to provide enough time and place to get a response from Mrs. Verscharen, who I can't remember if it was her or someone else. We almost had to come close to subpoenaing to getting to this this committee. So given that we have those obstacles practically in front of us is one of the reasons why I still believe that it was reasonable to come in here today to lay out our meeting, because if we don't get this done today on that, then we would then have to have another meeting, or we'd still have to plan for that first meeting coming back. So if we don't pass this, and I thought that was a decent compromise for everybody, is a guarantee that this is going to happen. And that was the full thing that we could do today and still can, is to guarantee that when we resume this House, we get to an issue where there actually has been all-party support in many respects with different shades on it, but still there, and we actually make it happen right away and can actually have the full resource of the House. So I'll keep responding if we want to, if people are disappointed to me, because I'm not going to let it stand that we didn't come here and we haven't been responsible. In fact, we've been consistently calling for further supports for this, including the whistleblowers for it, and that's what I'll be looking for when we return as to how they're actually going to have improvements for them. I've had motions in the past that were dealing with their situations, and I'll continue to raise those on a continual basis and try to employ opportunities for them to be heard as well. And this was a start, and I didn't even raise that component to add it here because I wanted to make sure we were going to get those meetings done right away. And we're going to be able to hear from them in the meantime. They're going to hear this, and whether they're going to be interested in participating. I have been in touch with a couple of them right now to hear what they're thinking. They're seeing what's going on here today, and I'm going to be focusing on that and also letting them get prepared to see what's going to happen, because those are the families and the people at the end of it, the day that we need to protect. And those are the people that I'm most interested in as well, because they've been left out there. So they will get an opportunity now to see what's happened today, see what's on the public record, prepare themselves, see what we're going to do as a committee, and if they want to come forward at some point in time, I'll be proposing an opportunity to do so. But I want to make sure that they are protected and they have the opportunity to do that.
Merci, Monsieur Massé. Monsieur Perkins.
Thanks. Just quickly, I mean, MP Massey's not the only one that's been in contact with the whistleblowers. I've had a lot of conversations with them since this became an issue. And they went public on it after their unsatisfactory response from the government. So, and in fact, we've had them in. And I think you were referring on the subpoena. I don't know if it was in this committee or another committee that we were doing that, but just to be clear and to reiterate, we've had great conversations to try and get to today, and as some of the members know, at least the opposition members, our original proposal was for 2 weeks. And in the spirit of compromise, we said, well, let's give the clerk and the committee a little more time, but somewhere in there, it could happen next week, it could happen 2 weeks from now, to provide a little more flexibility, also given the schedule of some members, to allow that to happen. And through that process, we've now gotten to a position where 2 meetings for 4 hours has been put down to 1 meeting and has been pushed off. So I think there was a lot of compromise going on before we got to this meeting to try and accommodate everyone. And so for anyone to suggest that I or anyone else was playing political games, I think the political games have gone on here where motions have been proposed contrary to the conversations, amendments have been proposed contrary to the conversations that were had before that with the parties in the opposition about what would happen. So all of a sudden, and it's both sides. All of a sudden, on both sides of the opposition table, in terms of the other parties, the contradictions have happened here in the committee. So I'm just pointing out that I'm more than willing to prepare and do all those compromises and work on that stuff together beforehand in the meetings as we do, but only if people live by those things when they come to this meeting, and they don't seem to do that. And it's happened here through the 2 motions and supporting the motions or the amendments to my motion, which are contrary to the compromise motion that we agreed to. So if you want to air dirty laundry in public, we can air dirty laundry in public. I don't want to do that. But I don't want to do that. But well, I'm just going by what you're telling. But if you want to get the floor, you can get the floor. And I know you'll put your hand up, MP Massey. So if you want to start doing that stuff in public, we can. But you're the one that raised it in public and said that those and flipped on some of the things that we talked about. So, and I appreciate that you are denying the conversations we had. So anyway, at the end of the day, this isn't about you. It isn't about me. It's about the corruption that's gone on here, and trying to get to the bottom of this in a timely manner. And that was the simple request, is to get to this in a timely manner. And the timely manner is not 2 months from now, when we have it before us now. And the extra time was just to allow a little more flexibility than my original 2 weeks. And so some of the government members have recognized, but not all, that there is a problem here, because some members have said, even today, that there's a problem and they're willing to do it. Others have made different comments. But in the end of the day, our first business back, as I understand it, was not a steering committee or business meeting. It was a continuation of clause by clause of C-27, the privacy bill. That's already on the schedule. And I assume, and I'm not sure what filibusters were referred to, because we had 21 hearings on C-27, followed by 10 meetings so far on clause by clause on C-27, which was where we were at the end of the day, and a bit of time on the NDP leader's private members bill that had to be dealt with by this committee. That list since last fall, I haven't seen filibustering in this committee, except for the last 5 meetings on clause by clause, where the Liberals basically continue to talk about one amendment through 5 meetings. So maybe it's the Liberals that you're referring to about the filibustering that was going on in committee, but it wasn't us over those 21 meetings plus the 6 meetings for MP Singh's bill. So I'll leave it there.
Merci, Monsieur Perkins. Monsieur Massé, non, c'est pas nécessaire. Que je ne vois pas d'autres orateurs.
Seeing no other speakers in presence or online, we will now vote on Mr. Villemur's amendment as amended by Ms. Damoff. On the amendment of Mr. Villemur, please.
Mr. Turnbull.
Yes.
Ms. Damoff.
Yes.
Mr. Gahir.
Yes.
Mr. Souza.
Yes.
Mr. Badaway.
Yes.
Mr. Perkins.
No.
Monsieur Généreux.
No.
Mr. Cooper.
No.
Mr. Brock,
No.
Monsieur Villemure,
En faveur.
Mr. Massey.
Oui. Donc, l'amendement est adopté.
The amendment is carried. Yes, I see that there's quite some excitement about it. And now, the motion as amended. Let us now vote on the main motion, as amended by Mr. Villemure.
The vote is on the motion as amended.
Good.
So essentially, just to recap, with the amendment by Mr. Villemure, it would be that it'd be the first item of business when we resume in September, that we have a 3-hour meeting with 1 hour with the Ethics Commissioner and 2 hours with Annette Verschuren, first item of business in September when we come back. So that is the essentially the motion we're voting on as amended. Madame la Greffière.
Mr. Turnbull,
Yes.
Ms. Demoff,
Yes.
Mr. Gahir,
Yes.
Mr. Souza,
Yes.
Mr. Badaway,
Yes.
Mr. Perkins,
A very reluctant yes.
Mr. Genereux,
Wait.
Mr. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Brock,
Yes.
Monsieur Villemure,
En faveur.
Mr. Massey.
Oui.
Amazing, colleagues. So the motion is adopted, which is the only item of business we had today for this committee. And it's been a great pleasure to see you all. And I can't wait to see you back in the fall.